Here I am describing a series of simple to complex postures and movements which have in them something for everyone. This is part of an expansive course that I teach entitled 84 Postures for Strength, Flexibility and Fitness. The first part of this video shows an advanced demonstration that's mostly not for everyone, but in the second part I show a series of simple spinal movements that's great for back health, energy and internal health. I begin the practice with some nerve tensioning movements which help to relieve problems in the arms. Turn the shoulders in, then turn the shoulders out and stretch the wrists, then turn the fingers up. These movements you see me repeat here several times, and between each of these nerve tensionings, I take the arms up high and traction the spine. Bending the knees is optional in these movements, and for most people it's better not to bend the knees so far, unless your knees are very strong and flexible. When the shoulders turn in and the wrists stretch, it's very good to relieve the radial nerve. Shoulders turning out, stretching the wrists, relieves the median nerve. Now I'm doing a series of spinal movements. The arm positions are optional. The 8 spinal movements include shortening and lengthening, bending forward and then bending backwards, as I'm doing now, and then lengthening the left side of the body and moving the hips to the left, then lengthening the right side of the body, moving the hips to the right. The trick is to really lift the shoulders past the ears. Then the 7th and 8th movements are twisting to the left and twisting to the right. It's good to keep the spine straight while doing this, and initially don't move the hips so much. It's important you move from the core. Now I'm doing a series of one-legged positions where you see me lifting the leg quite high, but actually it would be enough just to keep your toe tip on the floor and put all the weight on the standing leg. These movements are tremendous to strengthen the legs, but also to relieve any problems in your back. Again, I'm going through the simple spinal movements of forward, backward, sideways, twist. So sometimes it's uncomfortable to lift the leg up in the air like this, and it can overtense the front of the hip. So it's enough to keep the toe tip on the floor in front of you and just pull with the toe tip, and that actually relieves the front of the hip. This position with the leg behind is excellent to relieve the lower back and the knee if your thigh is turned inwards. Twisting positions are excellent to relieve lower back pain. Now I'm going to begin a simple sequence, sometimes called Salute to the Moon. When you bend forward, it's important to bend the knees enough that the chest and thigh can touch. When you lunge in this position, keeping the knee above the heel is very important for stability above the knee for most people. This is a deep lunge where I turn my right knee out. It's important here that you tighten the knee and make sure it doesn't overstrain the knee. Push-up positions are optional, and instead of the upward-facing dog and downward-facing dog, it's enough to lie on the abdomen and just gently lengthen the front of the body by pulling with the elbows. Stepping back and forth into these positions is a lot less strain than jumping back. Notice when I take my arms up, the shoulders go past the ears. This, if you can do it, will relieve the spine. Moving into these upward and downward facing dog poses is challenging in the up dog because you can squash the lower back, but in the down dog the aim is to really lengthen the lower back. So it's best to push the sitting bones down and top of the hips up, then lift the ribs up so you can actually expand the abdomen rather than pulling the navel toward the spine and see the abdomen. This can relieve the lower back. And when I lift my leg up in the air like this, I'm turning the thigh inwards for the leg in the air, and that relieves the lower back and strengthens the knee. Pushing the pubic bone toward the floor and breathing into the abdomen is what allows me to lift up to a handstand. But it's not important to do. So to lift up to any sort of arm balancing position, it's important to press on the palms with the fingers gripping the floor and keep the shoulders over the fingertips. I'm lifting primarily through the power of the breath into the abdomen. To come into a push-up by lowering like this is optional and quite challenging. This was meant to be a beginner to advanced demonstration that I'm showing you here. So not everything is suitable for everyone. Now I'm doing a series of standing postures, and this first one, the simple triangle position, is fantastic if you can work on turning your back thigh inwards while turning your navel upwards toward the ceiling. Lifting the arm off the floor to this unsupported position is something which is optional but can be really good for relieving the lower back. As one side of the body firms, the opposite side releases. When you're doing twisting positions like this one, it's important that you're not getting a stretch in the back of the leg. So here, it's important to bend the knee enough that the palm could easily be flat to the floor. Bringing the knee to the chest like this is good to relieve the lower back. So here on the second side, as I'm turning my trunk up toward the ceiling, the back thigh turns toward the floor, and that relieves the sacroiliac joint. Coming to the toe tips and fingertips is enough for this balance on the leg. Now when I lift the arm up in the air, it would be enough to keep my right leg on the floor. But what's happening here is I'm actually moving blood from one side to the other. So when balancing on the leg in that first position in the air, one side of my body changes temperature compared to the other. As the muscles compress and shorten the body, that pushes blood away from that region. When another part of the body is lengthened and relaxed, blood comes toward that region. In this way, you can really facilitate the movement of blood through your body without making your heart beat faster. There are much simpler sequences to do this in. Whenever I do any balancing position, it's enough to keep the toe tip on the floor, and you get very similar benefits. Now I'm lengthening the left side of the body. And in this position, the best benefits come if I firm the right side while shortening it and relax the left side while lengthening it. That's what facilitates blood flow. Ideally, when coming into these twisting positions, only go as far as your body wishes to go without forcing or pushing. Now I'm wrapping around and binding my arms, but for most people that would be impossible to do without straining the shoulders. So one choice is to tighten all the armpit muscles and turn further, but often that can cause blockage of blood. So it's better in the beginning to turn only as far as you can without sensing any tension in the body and making sure that you're not overstretching the joints. This whole series of standing postures, which I'll now repeat on the other side, is very good to relieve the front of the hip. So you see most of it comes with a lengthening of the front of the right hip. And the front of the right hip has important muscles such as the psoas muscle, which when tight will actually pull your lower back inwards and cause it to bend in a way which for many people causes back pain. This tightness at the front of the hip is usually from the 5 to 15 hours of sitting on chairs that most people do, and it's one of the most important things we need to alleviate. Much of this practice involves releasing the psoas muscle, and the best releases of the psoas muscle are done when it doesn't feel like it's stretching, rather it's relaxing. Now I release out of this pose and come back to the front of my mat, and then I'm going to do a series of postures related to the wide-legged position. I begin in what's called the elephant stance, which is a wide-legged position with my knees above the heels, my thighs turning out, and the heels squeeze in. Then after moving my nerves and spine a little bit, I'm going onto the floor, and I'm going to bend forward first from my spine, then from the hips. Again, it's important to know that you can bend the knees in these positions. Then, keeping the sense of the forward bending, I add on a twist in a forward bend, then twist in a back bend. It's important when you twist to change the shape of your spine, so not just twisting in one shape, but bending forward and bending backwards. This is a difficult balance where I take my left thigh underneath my right and hold on to the leg. The important part for most people is to recognize the importance of firming the inner thigh and releasing and relaxing the outer thigh. The first movement of this, before it starts to get difficult, is very relieving for many people. But often any part of this practice that I'm showing you here, where I touch one part of the body to another, is unnecessary for most people. And whenever I'm balancing on one leg, it's enough to keep the toe tip onto the floor. It's important to appreciate that whatever level you're at, practice in a way where you're not feeling stretch or tension. Again, I'm in this elephant stance and I'm tensioning nerves. These relieve the regions of the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and even help the neck. Now I'm demonstrating quite a difficult internal cleansing procedure where I'm rolling my abdomen using my rectus abdominis. This is something you can learn much easier in the simple spinal movements, but it's a very powerful exercise. And now I'm putting my hands on the floor and lifting up to a handstand. Again, simply pressing the palms onto the floor is enough and gripping with your fingertips. To lift up as I'm doing, the most important thing is to push the pubic bone and the sitting bones down into the floor while breathing into the abdomen. Now I'm beginning to do more difficult things. I lower into the full side splits. By keeping the legs actively lifting outward, this actually makes it easier to come into the splits. Lowering down from a handstand makes it harder. Now I'm going to begin a simple hamstrings lengthening position. The first part of the position has my spine straight, lifted up high and the legs straight. For most people, it's a mistake to bend forward with your spine while stretching the back of the leg. It's either you stretch the back of the leg or stretch the spine, but don't get a feeling of stretching both at the same time, or it's dangerous for the back and the hamstrings. In this position, I'm lengthening the front of the body without shortening the back. When doing these, sometimes called warrior positions, it's important to push the tailbone backward and down and not tuck the tailbone under. Now I'm doing a bound lotus position, and notice how I took my arms all the way around the back by moving from my core, by turning my spine and my shoulders, not just reaching round. This gives much more flexibility. Here again, lifting to the handstand and putting my legs into lotus. Notice that the lotus position ideally should not be done by using your hands, but you should come in more actively like this, and this prevents knee problems. But of course, if it doesn't come in easily, simply don't do it. Or better, just move only as far as you can without any sense of strain or stretch. As I'm going forward again here, I'm actually not feeling stretch. I'm feeling lengthening and relaxing. Once you start feeling stretch, the essence of the physiological benefits of the practice stop and it becomes very musculoskeletal, which is okay, but it won't give you energy. When you move in a way, for most people much less than I'm doing here, where you actually start to feel length and relaxation in the practice, you actually start to move blood through the body, and while keeping the nervous system calm, you actually get much more benefits. This is something that I'm doing now, which is something that I've practiced for many years. But the trick is to work in a way where you're not feeling strain while practicing. But if your aim is to actually do things like handstand, which is lots of fun, then it's important to keep the fingers gripping the floor. Here I'm practicing a handstand lowering into the headstand. Headstand is something which takes a long time to become prepared for. And I'm doing a series of headstand variations, but the important thing to realize here is in the beginning, I'm not tensing the muscles of my arms. I'm actually taking weight on the head. And the head is not being strengthened by the muscles of the neck, but rather the breath that goes to the neck. And this gives like an internal pressure, which actually protects my neck. But this is not something that most people can learn overnight. I don't recommend doing headstand for most people. Now I'm doing a series of variations of the spine and legs in the headstand, coming up and down. And this uses the muscles, the same muscles that we use for doing things like sit-ups. Putting my legs in the lotus position actively like this is a lot less strain than using your hands to pull the legs into lotus. And it's the best way to learn to do these positions. And if you can't actually come in like that, it's better to work towards moving the body in that way rather than forcing it in. While holding the leg in this headstand position, you can perhaps see me demonstrate breath control practices where I'm holding my breath out and expanding my chest without breathing, and at the same time I'm activating the rectus abdominis, the muscle we use for doing sit-ups, and the oblique muscles, the muscles we use for doing full and forced abdominal exhalation. This practice is a very good practice to do while standing up, but I rarely do it inverted. Otherwise it can cause a strain to the reproductive system and affect hormones, according to many traditional masters that I've spoken to. Now I lengthen the back of the body, move the chest toward the floor, and lower my legs to the floor in a headstand back arch. This is a challenging position, but it feels really amazing on the upper back. And I'm demonstrating one of the most fun exercises I've ever done in my life, which is very challenging, but it feels incredible on the kidneys and the lower back, provided you do it properly. And now I release my neck, coming up into a back arch, and let the neck come back and forth a few times. It's important you do that before coming back to the floor. Then once I come back to the floor, I release the neck by pressing the chin in and the neck back into the floor. And I come into a shoulder stand. These transitions are much faster than most people should do, and it's purely for demonstration. But for myself, because I've done them for so many decades, it doesn't feel uncomfortable. Most people shouldn't do shoulder stand. The neck is simply not strong enough. Now in this position, when I'm in the shoulder stand, I'm not actually resting on my neck as many people do. I'm pushing my shoulders into the floor and pressing the head into the floor and lift the throat up slightly. This has the effect of relieving any tension in the neck, the shoulders, and the upper back. It's one of the best exercises to do for that. There are simpler versions, of course. Now when I'm lifting the arms against the legs in the shoulder stand, I'm actually pushing my shoulders again into the floor at the same time. This is a difficult variation I'm doing now, and I'm twisting the body in the lotus position. It's important here that the neck is stabilized by gently resisting the neck into the floor. Now this exercise is like giving myself a massage. My hands press against the sacrum and the weight of the legs comes down into the hands, and it's a tremendous way of relieving around the sacroiliac joints. Then when I roll down, I'm rolling down one vertebrae at a time, and that is like a massage all the way down the back. Now I'm stretching the back of the leg, or so it seems, but in fact I'm avoiding the stretch in a way and preventing any hamstring problems by pushing the sitting bones toward the heel and pulling my heel toward the sitting bone with my hands. This exercise involves using the triceps to come up to a push-up position, and then once again I lift into the handstand by pushing my pubic bone toward the ground and breathing diaphragmatically right into the abdomen. It's the air pressure that actually lifts me up. Notice how before grabbing my foot, I lifted the leg up actively, taking the legs into the position as much as I could before I actually grabbed with my hands. The pressure underneath my armpit of my foot, if you can get it there, is designed to affect the nervous system. As the foot presses into the armpit, it actually changes the nervous system dominance. Balancing on the arms like this is quite challenging, but it feels amazing on the lower back. When I take my leg back into the air like that, turning the back thigh inwards is what relieves my sacroiliac joint and opens up the main energy center coming out of the lower back. Now I'm coming into a version of a posture many people call the pigeon. It's important with this to protect your knees by spreading the toes and pressing the left foot into the floor. I'm also lengthening the front of the right hip, and the simple variations can be useful to relieve the femoral nerve on the right leg and the sciatic nerve on the left leg, but now I'm doing a much more advanced variation where I bring my foot under my rib cage, and this can be great for massaging your internal organs, but most people will find it too difficult. Now, in this practice, I take the leg to a lotus position and reach my core and my arms around to a bound lotus. I'm doing a very difficult variation of a planche posture where I'm bringing my elbow right into the abdomen and fully relaxing the entire body, especially around the abdomen, so the elbow massages inside the body. And as I do this, it can really relieve the internal organs and massage the internal organs. Now I'm doing the other side, slightly different for the sake of the demonstration. I'm taking the leg behind the head here, and the purpose is not to stretch, but rather to relieve the neck itself by pressing the head against the leg. And that way, the neck muscles will become active in a lengthened position, like in the shoulder stand. I really want to reiterate that this is a practice which I very rarely would do, but it's just to demonstrate how some of the positions can be done. And it's very exhilarating to do this. It's lots and lots of fun, but generally I would consider it overstretching. Each of the positions you have to be very careful for, that you're not overstraining the knees. Once one part of the body is used to resist against the other, once you pull any of the bones into one position, then you have to be very careful not to overstretch ligaments and tendons. There are many variations in these practices. Now I'm doing the bound lotus again and coming back to Mayurasana. This practice of the elbow against the abdomen is a very useful practice, and it can be done simply in standing by pressing the fingers against the abdomen and breathing into the abdomen. It's a tremendous way of improving digestive function. Taking the whole body weight, as I do on the elbow, is a lot more challenging. Now I use similar breath control, breathing into the abdomen with my elbow in the abdomen to lift back up to the headstand, which is a really fun way of entering headstand. And then take my legs actively into the lotus position and come back onto my arms. Then once my knees are against my arms, I lean slightly forward and lift the body off the floor and prepare for a series of arm balances. These arm balances are tremendous for the shoulder and arm strength, but especially for the core. Notice I'm twisting my whole trunk from the core. The core is the region between the pubic bone and the navel, between the top of the hips and the tailbone. It's the inside point where all movement should start from. So you can see as I come in and out of these positions, the turning is initiated from that point. You have to be very careful for your neck at this position, because the neck has to be stably pressing into the floor. I actually push my head into the floor away from my neck as I'm doing this. These sideways balances are great to firm the side of the trunk. And now I'm coming into the side splits and preparing a finishing practice. This finishing practice brings my feet right up to my core. And you see me first pumping the core using the rectus abdominis with the breath held out. Then I bring my heels against the core with extreme external hip rotation. And pushing the feet against the core then stimulates the core and really energizes you. I hope you've enjoyed my demonstration. And now if you wish, you can follow a very simple practice of spinal movements where I interlock the fingers and take the trunk into a shortened to lengthened position, which is really great for relieving lower back pain. Then a series of forward bend, back bend, very simply from standing, side bends and twists. So follow my clicks and movements, follow my instructions, gently if you wish, and face toward the screen as we practice. Move gently, don't force anything, and be careful with the deep squats. Interlock the hands. Push the hips forward, the shoulders forward. Lengthen the back of the body and look down. Here to lengthen the spine, push the hips and the shoulders forward, grip with the toes, stay or lift outer feet and raise the heels. Push the shoulders forward and up, lift the outer feet. Lower the heels and then bend the knees. Push the hips forward and up in front of the collarbone. Hips forward and up in front of the collarbone, and that firms the abdomen. Shoulder down and forward above the tailbone, that firms your armpits. Firming the front, lengthening the back. Stay calm. Stay here. Or squeeze thighs, raise the heels. Stay here. Or bend the knees further, eventually hips to heels. Eventually chest onto the thigh. Squeeze your thighs slowly. Straighten the knees. Lower the heels, and now without shortening the lower back, we extend the spine actively. So lean enough forward so you feel like in Shalabhasana, the back of the body extended and the back muscles working. Then interlock the fingers. Push the sitting bone down and forward towards your toes, which gives you a slight Mula Bandha. Pull the middle back, not the lower back, in and lift the collarbone higher. Pull the shoulders together, closer to the hips and elbows higher. Lean forward, squeeze the thighs. Stay or lift outer feet, raise heels. Ankle clicking means you didn't grip the thighs enough. Stay or bend the knees further, eventually hips to heels. Squeeze your thighs, shoulder back and down, elbow up and back. Squeeze your thighs, slowly come back up. If you had to come up fast, it meant you probably went down too far. Lower the heels. Then we're going to bend sideways, so lengthen the back first. Interlock the hands, push the hip forward, the ribs back, the shoulders forward, lengthen the back of the body. Raise the arms without shortening the back of the body. Then look to your right and elevate the right hip and heel, tucking the tailbone under. Take the left armpit forward and up so you stretch the left side, using the shoulder and the hip to help. Sitting bone under on the right side, left shoulder forward and up. Stay there, or move your hips to the left and the ribs to the ceiling. Stretch the mat with your feet, left shoulder forward and up, right sitting bone under and forward. Push the hips to the right. Come up, lengthen the back of the body again. So, ribs back, tail under, lengthening especially the lower spine. Then from there, look to the left, lift right ribs and left heel. Stretch the right side of the body, maintaining the left side stretch. This is Parshva Konasana. Stay or move the hips to the right, the ribs to the ceiling. Stretch the mat with your feet, activating the abductor muscles in the outer thighs. Right armpit forward, left armpit down. Left sitting bone forward and up. Push the hips to the left. Come up. And again, lengthen the back of the body, ribs in, sitting bone under, especially the lower back lengthened. Now feel the shoulders going forward and up, lengthening the spine. Keep the back of the body long, equally on both sides. Rotate to your right side without shortening the right side. Don't do a side bend to the right. Keep the head above the sitting bones. And then from there, rotate head to right, right ear lifted, chin in. Then move the right sitting bone forward. Turn the navel to the left, the shoulders to the right. Come back to the middle. Again, lengthen the back of the body, head above the tailbone. Don't shorten the left, just rotate to the left, shoulders to left, navel to right. Push the left sitting bone down and forward. Be aware you're not bending sideways, not arching the back. Come forward again, back to the middle, hip forward, shoulder forward and up, face soft. Release and lower back down. Then, bring the fingertips to touch and follow again without instruction. Respond to my clicks, bend less or more according to what you feel appropriate for yourself. Lean slightly forward. Now I'll bend as far as I like, you bend as far as appropriate. Take a sip in and at your level follow. I'll face this way.